Hey everyone, good morning. Happy Sunday. We're going to continue reading, if you can read it, The Trauma of an American Education, 60 Years of Stories. We started with the third section, and I'm going to continue from where we left off. The last thing that I read was, and I knew they'd help me figure it out, and they did. As Gifted Services Coordinator, I was responsible for coordinating services for students who'd been categorized as gifted, often also at risk. So I set about to discover who these folks were and to set up some meetings for them in groups in the library so I could meet them en masse. It was a starting point, and here was one of the first things I discovered, that the school district and county were 50% Caucasian and 50% African American demographically. There were very, very, very few black students designated as gifted. Not cool at all. I had many students, black and white, in my two honors English classes, and what this meant was that some of the brightest, most imaginative, and mature minds in the school weren't receiving any services at all simply because their skin was dark. My inner moral compass was screaming in circular alarm. And so the first thing I did was upset the apple cart by changing up the determination process effective immediately, so that the blatant racism would not be able to continue as readily, perhaps, at least in the gifted services realm while I was there. Fortunately, as a facet of the gig, the district picked up the tab for me to attend classes held locally by UNC staff and earn state certification in gifted education K through 12. The certification, which I did earn in the 2 years allotted, was a whole other educational wake-up call. I have several vivid memories of this training, but the most vivid happened early on. We'd gotten an introduction to the course, and with it came several handouts, of course. One was a list of characteristics common to a gifted child. I was shocked. It was a description of me. These were my thought process, my capacities, and then there was an accompanying list of behaviors which came along with them and were especially problematic in an American school system where rote learning, sans creative outlets, had spelled early death for me and many others I'd encountered along the way. No creative outlets in the classroom, no chance to go ahead of the class with reading. I flashed back to how many times I'd been kicked out of a classroom because we'd been reading as a class and I'd finished the chapters before the others were done with page 1. Boredom is not a productive thing. An idle creative mind can and has done much damage in every classroom in this country. When we got out of the training that day, I phoned my sister mom halfway across the world in China. "You're not going to believe this," I yelled through the phone to her in Nanjing, "but I think I'm gifted." There was rich laughter on the other end of the line. "No shit," she chuckled. It must have been through this coursework that I discovered some resources to help me figure out how to approach the racist guidelines that had thus promoted white students hundreds of times more often than their black friends. The fact that many of the white students labeled as gifted only had their daddy's last name and mama's wholehearted righteousness to slide them onto that list did not escape my notice. I knew from having them inappropriately placed in my honors English classes there could be no other reason they'd been designated other than politics. They were the children of the school board members and some of the teachers and the wealthiest farmers. It was their system. They built it. Or was it their slaves, the grandparents of the black students unconsidered, who shared the same last names with the white offspring? And by gum, they were gonna come first. Now here's a racist statement for you from me. Black folks rarely, if ever, have entitlement issues. It is actually comic, if it weren't so tragic, for white folks to call black folks entitled, especially since this is usually what is said when what is being requested is far less than what is way past due. Anyway, I discovered an IQ test, standardized no less, which had been created specifically to afford rural African American students a fair shake, simply by utilizing questions and terminology derived from their own cultural and personal world, rather than a world they had never even been invited into. Imagine that. Now, it became immediately possible for our black students to sit for this exam in place of the standard white exam, and ensured it would be used to determine a student's IQ should it be warranted. I encountered the same culturally, geographically testing language everywhere I went in the public school system. It is no wonder to me why the white rises to the top in this nation. Every system, down to its most minute, seemingly unimportant specifics, was created exactly so the white could rise to the top. I also instituted a selection process for gifted services that demanded a student meet 5 out of 8 determining factors, rather than simply the IQ test, other standardized exams, or class grades. I added sections which catered to other characteristics of gifted individuals, including creativity, leadership, mechanical abilities, which opened things up for the musical and artistic geniuses, as well as those with mechanical prowess. I had discovered what I suppose I had always known from my own experiences. The folks who were there to educate others, who were not often gifted themselves, had some strange ideas about genius. It was white and well-mannered, like their Jesus, but it certainly didn't describe any genius I'd ever met. I don't honestly know how this was all received because, as we all know, folks lie and pretend more often than speak their truth. On top of that was a layer of ice simply because I was an outsider. Southern hospitality edicts demand a welcoming posture, but there's no need to cozy on up to strangers, especially Yankees, especially from a place as wanton as New York, which to everyone outside of the Northeast United States means New York City. Somehow no one in the larger nation remembers that the state is hundreds of times the size of the city, with millions of people and quite a range of demographics. At any rate, no one bothered to do much more than say hello for some months, waiting and watching as it were. I spent time getting to know the students, figuring out how I could best serve them. I knew from the academy experience that what I referred to as a missionary-style relationship rather than useful was potentially harmful. What this means is simple, really. Don't offer someone something you think they need or want in order to improve their quality of life. Before you ask, for God's sake, ask what is needed. Then work together to create it. Learn from each other. Do not assume your needs are theirs. Do not assume you know what is needed. Just ask, watch, respond, grow. Once I started to become more educated about gifted services and public education, I sought out ways in which I could share the information and possibilities with my fellow educators. Most gifted services programs in this country, when they do exist as just that, programmed. They are not organic structures growing out of genuine needs, watered with real possibilities for exploration. This new way of offering more fluid and useful services within an archaic system required that I go find individual teachers who may be open to doing things a little differently. I would ask them if I could visit them in their classroom and make an appointment if they said yes. I'd ask them what they were teaching, what students were learning. I'd look at student work, ask what was most frustrating, lots of questions, but my questions were born from a genuine interest and wish to learn, and so the need to become defensive rarely arose. It was a perilous balance, once I had learned how to maintain from my time at the academy community. One of the teachers who decided to give it a whirl was definitely unexpected. I hadn't even been invited into her classroom yet. An upper-level mathematics teacher with a reputation as a serious hard-ass. I'm not sure I ever saw the woman smile. She came to me one morning in the library before the bell rang and got right to the point. I have 8 youngins in my trig class who already understand what we're studying, and another 30 who are completely lost. She came right to the point. Okay, I said, shrugging and looking her in the eye. 8 math geeks, no problem. I smiled inside. Trigonometry, no less. Something else I was completely clueless about but was supposed to teach. But that wasn't a problem. Given what the folks at the academy had taught me, I knew that a teacher didn't need to have any specific information to teach. I simply needed to be willing to learn enough to guide them through designing and implementing a project that would allow them to cement their learning through a creative effort together. Teachers don't need to know anything other than how to learn. That's what we really impart or fail to impart when we teach. For me, teaching is more about blindly leading the sighted into places that demand they close their eyes and reach for each other's hands, move toward a deeper understanding within themselves in the context of their own lives, then open their eyes and live accordingly. Well, she wanted to know, how does this work? When do you have them? I asked. 8th period, she said. I shrugged again. Send them over, I suggested. We'll figure out a project for them to show what they know. I don't believe we truly learn something until we use that knowledge to create something new or fresh with it, or with the questions that rise out of the knowledge attained. Creative educational ventures often yield questions asked and unasked, known and unknown. We've replaced this genuine knowledge in the U.S. with measuring how well someone can vomit rote facts. It's a tragedy. Also one, if not the primary reason, we are far down on the rating list educationally among other developed countries. I already knew the students fairly well. They were in my honors English class, as well as on the growing list of gifted students warranting services. We met later that day, as I recall. They strolled into the library right after the Pavlovian bell rang, excited, aloof, wary, curious, the whole gamut. They plunked themselves down at one of the big wooden library tables and assumed their positions. You know, excuse me, the ones we've all donned by the age of 14 as full body and facial armor to keep ourselves safe out there in Teenville. These were the cream of the crop, as some of the teachers and administrators referred to them, but there was only one single person among them with any sense of awareness and presence. Presence and awareness are rarely taught or conveyed in public education, other than using tools in a shop class or yoga in phys ed. Sadly, presence and awareness demand a consistent presentation. These are not learned in a class with a test, or in any class at all for that matter. These qualities must be seen in the lives of the adults around them if they are to be taught for real. The students who shine like beacons for others are true to themselves and compassionate with others as much as possible, even in the public high school arena. I had met this young man's folks. They also had a penchant for looking a person in the eye, practicing kindness and compassion, demanding respect by respecting others. Not common qualities in my experience, but ones which can certainly be passed on via both nature and nurture. Being present and aware was valued and taught at home, allowing him to share such things with his fellow learners, extremely rare. But Plato would have been proud. When a group of learners contains one person with natural presence, just one who has resisted donning the cloaks of the ignorant dramas which serve as prevalent defense mechanisms in our young people's world, it allows things to happen that otherwise wouldn't occur, and with a fraction of the effort on the teacher's part. A natural leader, which is what these folks often become in the larger world if they survive the system, for they are not ever followers of anything but their own questions and longings, works to inspire and coalesce fellow students with such ease that I, as a teacher, often simply stand back and offer help. It becomes more a matter of watching something amazing unfold than it is leading anyone anywhere. Without such a beacon in a group, the teacher must hand feed the students questions and creative ideas. It's akin to starting a campfire in the rain. With one person wide awake, the fire sparks and grows astonishingly quickly, and I become a mere fire tender. I make an effort not to begin anything without pausing enough to get everyone quiet. And despite everyone telling me it was impossible to do so in a public school setting, I recited a poem or sang a song with students together each time before starting a class or journey. Some of them learned and memorized each word and inflection as it was fed to them. Memorization and recitation are lost arts. Aside from all the intellectual and academic attributes they inspire, such a practice clears the air and gets everyone in the same room at the same time in a matter of moments. I'm going to end there for now. And then I tell a little story about what happens. And we can go on from there. Anyway, thanks for listening. You guys have a great Sunday. Cheers.